So this kind of like very similar numbers for those. And I don't know, is it like the complexity of operation? There's like high volume of production. We have seen supply chain challenges. We've got staff turnover and shortages, and all these factors probably affect the hygiene and housekeeping oversight. Or is it something that really seems simple or less critical so that it may be overlooked, especially in non-production areas or surfaces that do not come into direct contact with food? So cleanliness across the premises is really important as this possesses a high risk of cross-contamination to product. And what I'm going to say is knowing your site is also very important. So, hard to reach areas, hard to see areas, roof void, enclosed systems, are there any deadlines in the pipe work, things like that. And effective mitigation of this non-conformity is also, very closely associated with some of the other requirements in the standard. So we'll talk through there. So there are other parts in the standard which will affect 411.1 or hygiene and housekeeping in general on site. So the first thing I would say here is culture, 112. And the culture within a food manufacturing site, I would say, strongly influences hygiene and housekeeping practices. So, a culture that prioritizes cleanliness, safety, and responsibility creates an environment where employees are more likely to adhere to best practices. Things like leadership, training, communication, values, all of this contributes to shaping the culture and in turn maintaining a safe and hygienic manufacturing site. Last week at another webinar, we discussed about giving hygiene a place at the table. So, how would you include hygiene and housekeeping in your culture? So, make the most of the knowledge of the operatives. Use their feedback for things like creating cleaning instruction cards because they are the ones using them. How to make them more efficient and easy for them to interpret. You could include them in your decision making process, if you need a new equipment, or consider their inputs when discussing the length of the hygiene windows during planning. Hygiene managers are also quite good in keeping up with regulations, so use their input when you're establishing your HACCP plans, and invite your hygiene reps to your HACCP team meetings, production huddles, etc. Just kind of encourage collaboration because it's not separate from anything that you're doing. I think another clause in the section that influences these entities, actually not a clause, I would say the whole section 411 as such can influence 411.1. So if you look at 411.2, it kind of touches on the frequency of cleaning, method of cleaning. So look at, is the frequency adequate? Is the method suitable? Are the operatives trained sufficiently? All of this will affect 411.1. Also, I would say if you haven't seen it or if you're not very familiar, or you don't use it much, have a look at the interpretation guide. It has some really useful guidance. So if you see clause 411.2 on in the interpretation guide, it gives a lot of guidance into developing an effective cleaning procedure. So have a look at that. I think another clause that kind of links with 411.1 is clause 344, which is the requirement to have documented hygiene inspections to assess cleaning and housekeeping performance. So 344 says that you need to carry out these hygiene inspections at least once a month or on a risk-based schedule. So that if you're kind of doing really good inspections, and you shouldn't have non-conformities against 411.1. Also, sometimes in my experience, I know it's always the same QA team members who are doing these hygiene inspections, every day, or whatever their frequency is set. So sometimes you get so used to looking at some of these things that you may overlook some of this stuff. But consider using, other teams or people from different areas to carry out these inspections. It just helps because you have different people looking at the same thing. So the recommendation around this clause is to implement pragmatic measures that support a sanitary environment, and ensure you can provide a rationale for the schedules and the practices just to demonstrate adherence to the established plan. So yeah, that was our top non-conformity clause 411.1. Moving on, 4911. The clause wording is mainly unchanged. This is our second highest, most common occurring non-conformity. And the clause requirement is that processes shall be in place to manage the use, storage, and handling of non-food chemicals to prevent chemical contamination. Sorry. There were a couple of new bullet points that were added to this clause, which was procedures to manage spills and procedures for safe and legal disposal. So these were like the couple of additional clauses. Um, so I think the use of non-food chemicals in food processing is so diverse and so complex. So you could have something ranging from cleaning chemicals and sanitizers to, on the other end, you could have maintenance related chemicals. And managing this array of chemicals, necessitates comprehensive procedures to ensure their proper use, storage, handling, and the complexity of chemical management increases the likelihood of non-conformities during the audits. In terms of what I've seen, the kind of non-conformities that were raised so far, a lot of them are still relating to the previous topics which are a part of issue 8. So these include things like failure to keep the chemical store locked, or controlled or authorized access, especially when it's not in use, um, inadequate labeling, especially when you're decanting from bulk containers into smaller containers, or containers for use in specific areas like production, and improper storage. So there's inadequate or missing bunding, things like that. So all of these were still a part of issue 8, and these continue to be some of the highest non-conformities in issue 9. And I've also seen a few non-conformities where it seems that sites sometimes struggle to understand how to dispose empty or leftover chemical containers. So a lot of this information should be available to you on the MSDS, so that those are the material safety data sheets that are supplied to you by your chemical suppliers. If you have any doubts, get in touch with your local authorities as to how you need to dispose some of these things. You can also always go back to your supplier. They should be able to guide you as to what to do. Uh, Again, training of the staff in handling these chemical containers is quite important, because we've seen some non-conformities over there as well. I think another common trend I mentioned earlier on is access to chemicals is not restricted, and some chemicals are not labeled correctly. So, correct storage of chemicals when not in use is very important, like a secure storage, limited access granted only to trained personnel. And my suggestion here around this clause and the high number of non-conformities is that if you're finding these NCs being raised at your site, either during your internal audits or your external audits, whichever way, maybe consider adding this clause to your hygiene and fabrication inspections, just so that this is being continuously monitored, and you don't have to wait for your internal audits or for somebody external to point this out to you. So if you do think, and again, this is one of the top NCs anyway, so maybe add this to your checks. And I would also say, because it's chemicals, it's quite an important one here. Though 344 does not especially kind of specifically say that you need to do root cause analysis for the hygiene inspections, maybe consider using root cause analysis. It's a very good tool to help you get to the bottom of these non-conformities and prevent reoccurrence. So just some suggestions there around this clause. Okay, so moving on to number 3, 462. So this is the only one actually that is a totally new requirement in issue 9. and we have updated the wording. We have actually done a substantive update to the whole section 4.6 around managing risks of equipment, considering things like hygienic design, stuff like that. So 4.6 and all its clauses, so there's 461 to 467, they were all introduced as part of issue 9. And the different clauses are referred to old and new equipment as well. So the clause with the highest number of non-conformities is 462. And the clause says that the design and construction of equipment shall be based on risk to prevent product contamination. There's a bit more in there as well. So why this is on the top five, I would say, is that generally we see that when we launch a new standard, that clauses which have major changes or newly introduced clauses generally come up in like the top most commonly occurring lists. And it's because sites are new to the requirements. It takes a while to get used to them. So I'm thinking it'll be interesting to see if the frequency of this zone conformity falls next year. But yeah, we'll see when we get there. So some of the requirements around this is that both existing and new equipment will be evaluated under this section. And while this may pose significant challenges for businesses necessitating investments in new equipment, a crucial aspect of the requirement is the consideration of risk. So this is very critical in determining the acceptability of your equipment design and construction, particularly keeping in mind potential product contamination. I think there's a sentence at the end of the clause which says equipment involved in direct food contact will be subjected to, like, there will be more attention towards that. And I think generally the design of equipment plays a very important role in maintaining the food safety standards. The equipment should be designed to be easily cleanable, minimizing areas where contaminants could accumulate, and selecting materials that are appropriate for food contact. So these are some of the essential considerations. And again, I think regular inspections, maintenance, these are all quite important to make sure you comply with this standard. In terms of NCs, particularly in this area, I think I've seen a lot of non-conformities that mention food contact equipment or surfaces that are showing rust or flaking paint. There's some broken parts. So these are some of the things that kind of pop up quite a bit in the trends. I'm also seeing some mentions of unsuitable welds and joints because that's kind of covered in this clause as well. So I think the intent of the clause is simple, that equipment should be suitable for the intended purpose. And there's a lot of emphasis based on equipment which comes into direct food contact. One thing I want to say is during the BRCGS audit, the auditor is not going to be able to inspect every seal or bolt or food contact surface. But I think what they want to understand is the site processes. So, what are the site processes for buying new equipment? Is the HACCP team being involved in the decisions being made when, they're buying new kit? Or, they will still look at, a small number of samples, as we call it, where there is like food safety implications. So this may be completed during, maybe 411 when they're looking at equipment hygiene, for example. Again, like I said before, all of these clauses are quite interconnected. So again, if you're seeing these non-conformities on your site, maybe consider adding these as well. Your hygiene and housekeeping inspections, you're going to have a very big checklist, but you don't need to do all of that at the same time either. So you can kind of split your hygiene and housekeeping inspections, which are required under 344, into different ones. Because if you have a very long checklist, the people will kind of want to finish them quickly, or for whatever reason, they might not be effective. So maybe kind of split that out as well. If you're seeing a high number of NCs, just because these are some of the top non-conformities, it's quite important to kind of zoom in on them. Okay, so this was number 3. We're going to quickly look through the next two, which are doors and walls. So, number four on our most commonly arising non-conformity is 448, which is doors. So, the standard requires that doors, both internal and external, shall be maintained in a good condition. So, what we're expecting is that the doors should be like close fitting, they should be pest proofed. External doors to open product areas should not be open during production periods. And yeah, mainly pest proofing and other things. So I think what we're seeing in terms of non-conformities are the doors are not sealed properly. There are some of them which are damaged. Sometimes I think I saw a few where they were on the maintenance schedule, but the maintenance never got around fixing them, things like that. So I guess these are some of the main trends I'm seeing in the doors, non-conformity 448. So I think it's quite important to make sure that any repairs are being promptly addressed. I think this is one of the biggest things that coming out of this clause. And like I said, the doors are quite important because I think they are one of the primary points of access, and you need to form a secure barrier against external factors. Otherwise, it's going to compromise hygiene and safety of your food processing environment. Obviously, pest ingress, you need to make sure that the doors are kind of preventing that. And operational efficiency, you want to make sure you're not losing the temperatures, things like that. Um, so yeah, just a quick recaps on what I've seen. So wear and tear. So it's just kind of high traffic areas, etc. You need to make sure that you're addressing these issues. Again, lack of inspection. I think things like doors, we all come across them all the time, and sometimes we just don't notice what's going on. So, get someone else to do your inspections, I guess. Put them on your list of hygiene. You're going to have a very long list of your hygiene inspection schedule, but put them on there, if you need someone else to have a look at it, because you might not notice it. And yeah, so just to mitigate some of these non-conformities, make sure you have like a good maintenance plan, inspections, and promptly address any issues identified with doors. And preventative maintenance, I guess, is one of the a good preventative action. Okay, these are quite basic. Doors, walls. They've always been there on these top NC's lists. So again, walls, 411, this is number 5 on our list today of the most commonly occurring non-conformities. So the requirement is that walls shall be finished and maintained to prevent accumulation of dirt, minimize condensation and mold growth, and facilitate cleaning. I think walls are so highly visible, and they are something your auditor will see first as soon as they arrive in your facility. So it's kind of your chance to make a positive first impression. And it's quite important to not overlook the condition of your structural elements either. So I would say look at what is on your walls. You might have a lot of things over there. You might have signage, you might have PPE dispensers, there's going to be shelves, there's going to be shadow boards, there's going to be so much on your walls. So make sure what's behind these as well, because as soon as you put something on there, on the wall, there is going to be like a space between what is on there and the wall. So that could lead to a lot of potential issues. There could be pest hiding spots, and there might be condensation. There could be a lot of issues with things on the wall. So what I'm trying to say here is, like, make sure you know what's on there. It's important to review the suitability of the stuff that is placed on the walls, and the risk that it comes with. So also, condensation, mold, these are a serious concern in food processing facilities, and properly finished walls help control things like moisture and the likelihood of mold growing. Um, what was I going to say? Yeah, so poor construction, sometimes design choices aren't great either. So make sure you're kind of, again, hygienic design, not only of equipment, but of your structural walls, things like that. Again, inspections, sometimes we kind of don't notice some of the things on there. So maybe inspections might help. And yeah, I think that's about it around walls. Okay, so I think we've gone through the top five non-conformities, and what can we learn about these? So what are we seeing? So like I said, hygiene still continues to be one of the top ones, not only in food, but also in some of our other standards. And why are we seeing this? Even though this is something very basic, and there hasn't been much change around this wording of this. Things like, thinking about budgets rather than hygienic design. Think about what we are doing there, because you might get non-conformities. There might be bigger issues that this will cause on your side. The basics are sometimes overlooked. So, the phrase "getting the basics right," it underscores the foundational principles that are crucial for success in the food industry. So by focusing on some of these basics, hygiene, chemical management, walls, doors, these are, your cornerstones of what you're doing. You need to establish a solid framework, not only for meeting this requirements or of this standard, but also for creating a culture of, excellence and food safety in your food production facilities. And all these points, as an industry, if we embrace, we will be able to move past some of these basic non-conformances once and for all. So that's what we want to see, like a step change. And how do we do that? So root cause analysis is very important. And while I was preparing for this webinar, I was looking at some of the data that's submitted to the BRCGS directory. And so things like, it's not about blame culture that, the operator didn't do this properly or personal error. These are not root causes. You need to identify a correct root cause. I saw one statement where it said, I'm not kind of not for this, but previously I've come across a statement where the site had written things like it was a very long day and the operator was tired, and I'm like, okay, I do have sympathy for your operators, but you need to identify the root cause, and effective root cause analysis is your foundation to prevent reoccurrences. So uh, root cause analysis has a strong focus in the food standard, and root cause analysis is mentioned a number of times. So not only for your non-conformances, but for recalls, for withdrawals, for everything else. And I want to say root cause analysis is not straightforward. I understand it takes time to identify why something occurs. There are various tools, so use these tools. The five why is the most commonly talked about root cause analysis tool, where you ask why until you come to the actual root cause. There are other tools as Fishbone, there's various other tools. So use those tools, train your team to use these tools effectively. And, like I said, human error may seem to be a contributory factor, but there is something else there. So identify, which process, procedure, way of working failed, resulting in that human error. And then the preventive action will relate to that process or procedure, which will prevent the recurrence. So I think I'm saying the same thing again, but I'm trying to emphasize that you need to find out what caused the problem, what happened, in order to find the solution. So there is a bit of mention of root cause analysis in the standard in the appendices as well. There is a guideline that BRCGS have published on root cause analysis that is available on Participate. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Participate and all the guidelines and the material that we have that can help you get past these non-conformities. So I'm just going to go back to Participate. I was just talking about it now. So some of you might know BRCGS Participate, but now it's moved to a new platform. So, and it is a BRCGS and LGC Assure platform now. So all certificated sites have free access to participate. So if you are a certificated site and you haven't explored participate, I would recommend that you go there, go and participate, register yourself. There's a wealth of information there. There's lots of guidelines, guidances that are available. Uh, so, have a look, explore that. And yeah, just one thing that since we've moved the online platform now, so if you previously had access, doesn't mean you will have access again. So you might have to create a new login. But if you go in there, it's quite straightforward. It'll explain to you how to get a new login. But like I'm saying, if you have any trouble, accessing participate, you believe you should have access and you don't, get in touch with us and one of us will try and help you. But like I said, root cause analysis guidelines, there's a lot of information available to you. And we work very hard to put together all these documents. So I think since the Food Safety Issue 9 was published, we've created, lots of the interpretation guide, like I mentioned, has a lot of information. Have a look at that. You've got, understanding production risk zones, category guidelines, lightning best practice, things like that, air quality requirements. And we are always, this is not an up-to-date list, unfortunately, but we're always updating our guidelines, whatever material is available to you out there. So use this information to help you with your non-conformities. And the Ask the Expert webinar series as well. This was a big hit. So we started these as a part of guidance after Food Issue 9 was published. So we've done, I think, about 9 or 10 so far. And again, these are available to you free of cost. If you go on to the BRCGS website, you need to register them and then you can see them on demand as well. So there was a lot of interest in these. We've had a lot of registration, and these are very, very useful. So we've got experts on each of these topics, and you submit your questions in advance, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can around these specific topics. So I think we've already done number 10 and 11. Yeah. So we've got one more left for this year, incident management, which is happening in December. But so I'm just putting it out there that there is a lot of information, a lot of guidance available to you. If you have questions about interpretation of the clauses, look at the interpretation guide. The BRCGS team, technical team also is available if you have questions around interpretation of certain clauses. So we have an email address where you can reach out to us if you are having trouble with some of that interpretation. So I think that brings me to the end of my slides around the top 5 non-conformities issued against Food 9. I hope this was useful. We do have some time to take some questions. So I am going to have a look at some of the questions here. And again, try and use the Q&A rather than the chat box. Sorry, just give me a second to look at some of the questions. Okay, so there are some questions around, let's see. These NCs were minor. Do you have data for major and critical? So I do have data. I'm not going to share it right now, but if you're interested in anything specific, you can reach out to us. It's only because, like I said before, the majors and criticals as compared to the number of minors are a very small number. So it's kind of, the trends, we can probably wait for a whole year before we have some meaningful trends around that. So yeah, uh, if you have any specific questions around majors and criticals, just reach out to us. We might um, help you out there. A lot of the non-conformities are linked to visual inspection. That's true, actually. And I don't know if it is something to do with more unannounced audits, where sites are probably preparing themselves for all the documentation and everything. You probably know that GFSI requires 1 in 3 unannounced audits, and a lot of these audits are coming through now, the mandatory unannounced. So there is a chance it's probably linked to that. I don't know. So don't quote me on that. But yeah, we have, yeah, you're right. A lot of it are related to visual non-conformities. So some things that happening on the day rather than the site being prepared for stuff like that. Somebody's asking that culture was in the top 5 NCs, but it's not on the list anymore. So yeah, that's true actually. So when culture was first introduced, we did say culture as one of the top 5 NCs across most of our standards. But like I said, when it's a new requirement, sites sometimes do struggle with, interpretation or how they want to implement it on their site. But as time goes on, sites get more of a hang of it, and the culture has dropped from the top 5, which is great. A good thing to know. So there's somebody is saying that they're a small business and they are in a remote location, and sometimes they're not sure about chemical disposal. So I think engage with your suppliers. That's the first, point. Your suppliers might sometimes, help you pick up those empty containers or unused chemicals. Get in touch with your local authorities. They might be able to help you, with something. So there are, various methods that you could use. So what consideration should be made for the design of equipment to facilitate easier cleaning? So yeah, hygienic design is something that is considerably newer to this standard. So in terms of facilitating cleaning, I would say include like smooth surfaces, non-porous surfaces. The equipment should have like minimum crevices, or joints where the contaminants can accumulate, and select materials, if possible, that are easy to clean and maintain. Um, I guess, yeah, and regular inspections, probably. So there's a question says, if a company successfully deals with the NCs, do they get the certification? So yeah, there is a timeline that your CB will give you. I think it's 28 days for you to successfully close the non-conformity. So you need to submit to your certification body um, your root cause analysis and your preventative actions. And if it gets accepted and you've kind of done everything that you've said that you will do, then the non-conformities are closed. So you do have time to close your non-conformities. If you have any doubts around that, maybe kind of get in touch with your certification body. They might be able to help you there. So if a site is not complying against the interpretation guide, is it a non-conformity? Or non-conformities can be raised only against the standard? So yes, non-conformities can be only raised against the requirements of the standard. Non-conformities are not raised against the interpretation guide. So uh, yeah, you're correct. You cannot have non-conformities against the interpretation guide. Okay, somebody's asking me certification grade trends from issue 8 to issue 9. Okay, I don't have that data right now prepped on for this, but I can probably have a look. If you have specific questions, maybe get in touch with us. I've got a slide. The next slide has the email address. So it's brcgs.inquiries@lgcgroup.com. If you have specific, questions around any of these non-conformities, anything around interpretation, kind of just reach out to us, and the technical team, so these emails come to the technical team and we will probably be able to help you out if possible. So it's brcgs.inquiries@lgcgroup.com. Mm, are there any food equipment manufacturing companies that are BRCGS certified? So the food safety standard will not be applicable to food equipment manufacturing companies. But we do have other standards. So if a manufacturer falls under, I don't know, anything specific as such, I don't think well, not consumer products. I would doubt if there's any manufacturing, food equipment manufacturing companies that fall under BRCJ. So we kind of cover all the steps in the food supply chain from the farm gate. But I would, no, I don't think that food equipment manufacturing could be certified against BRCGS. Okay. So there's a question around supplier compliance. If a supplier doesn't have third party, it's not really relevant to this webinar. Denny's, I think, but I can quickly answer this. So there is a clause which talks about the different steps you can have for supplier approval. So it's either a GFSI for high risk suppliers, GFSI or third party certification. For low risk suppliers, you could do like a second party audit or a supplier approval questionnaire. But you look at that or reach out to us and I'll kind of answer those questions. Okay. There's something about participate. How do I get confirmation of participation? Okay, I don't know what that means. Okay, there's a question about the webinars mentioned on the last couple of sites. So this was Ask the Expert series. They are recorded. They are available on the BRCGS website. So if you go on the BRCGS website, it will ask you for your name and email address and some basic information, but they are available free of charge. So you can watch those on demand. Okay, so I think there's a lot of other questions, but I'm going to kind of stop taking the questions here. We might get back to you if there are some other questions. I'll probably do like a FAQ summary when we send out the recording at the end of it. So again, I hope this has been useful and thank you everybody for your time. And good luck. I hope you all do not get these commonly occurring non-conformities and reach out to us if you have any other questions. Thank you.